Hey everyone, in this video, as I mentioned on Twitter and LinkedIn, I am going to be showing you guys how to acquire a full year of minor league play-by-play data, as well as writing it to an SQL database. So, lucky for you guys, I got a new computer. So, what I'm going to show you guys is the whole process of getting an SQL database, and we're going to use Postgres because it's an open source database and it allows you to use, however you want to use it. So, and it's also free, so that's another advantage that I like to have. So, I'm on a Windows computer, so I will show you guys how to go it through Windows way, but it's pretty straightforward through Mac OS as well. But we're just going to get right into it. So we'll click on the Windows functionality. We'll scroll down and we see the various versions. Just make sure that your Windows platforms fits all of these. So my computer has Windows 11, so the version 10 would not work for that, but we're going to get the most recent version, and you'll have to click up here on the download the installer. So we'll click on that. And we'll see that we have Windows 64. So we'll click that, download. Should pop up on your computer. I don't know if you can see that part of the screen in terms of those files, but you download it, then you just run the exe file. So we will come back shortly. Now we're going to look at the setup. So it should pull you up to this setup wizard. You just click through, pick the installation directory, and then what components you want to install. So at the very least, it's up to you. I'm going to have all four, but at the very least you want PostgreSQL server and PG Admin 4, because PG Admin allows us to create said database. So then we'll hit next. Your data directory, where you want your data stored, and then for your super user password. So just to make it simple and for you guys, I'll just create it called password. So password, I'll hit next. Port, that's just like a local port that allows you to listen on your PG admin, so you can look at your PostgreSQL database. Put whatever you'd like as long as it's 4 digits, but I'll just keep it as is. And then default locale, you can leave it as default. You can put a certain locale, just leave it as default. And then just make sure it all installs. So we'll click next and next. And we'll let her run. Now that we have it ran, you click finished, you search up PG admin on your computer, and that this should pull up, and it should give you an option to set your master password. So whatever you want it to be, just put in your master password and set it. So then when we click on servers over here, we'll click on servers. It should almost always say PostgreSQL, whatever version you picked, and then I'll click down on it, and then we say whatever the password we set earlier, not the one you just set, type it in. So type it in, and then if you want to click save it, you can to make it easier on you. And boom. Now we have one database called Postgres, and you can create a new database. So we'll say create a new database, and we'll call it minor_league _baseball. I'll just click save. So in that way, we have a minor league baseball database. And then within that, we'll have schemas, various items, but we'll click under schemas. The reason why is we have tables, and that's where we are going to insert that data that we pull into said table. So once we're done with this, I will show you in R first how to acquire that data and put it into a table in PostgreSQL. We're in R, and we're going to get right on into it. So, simply put, let's install our packages to allow a PostgreSQL server into R. So R Postgres. So run it. Should say some kind of message like this: successfully installed. Perfect. So now we'll call that into our library, our Postgres. And then we'll create our connection. So I'm just going to copy and paste code, makes it easier. And we're going to run the db connect, which is within DBI, which is installed when you install our Postgres. Our Postgres, database name is our database name, whatever we named it. So in that example before, we named it Minor League Baseball. Again, whatever you name your database, that's your database name. Your host is your host, so if you have it extended to an Amazon web server or anything like that, or if you just want to run it locally, your host is more than likely 127.0.0.1. And double check, but in most cases this works. Just leave a comment below if it doesn't. The port that we specified, so the one that we specified earlier in the video was 5432, and then your username and password. For most cases, the username was Postgres. The password is whatever password you set the second time. So not the first time, but the second time. So I'm going to run this and then show you guys how to acquire minor league data, put it into the database, and show you an example. Now that we have our connection loaded, after you input all your information, run the code, and it should pop up as CON from the code that I copy and pasted. Anyways, what we're going to do next is load in some libraries to get the minor league data that we want. Because we love minor league data. So we got library baseball R, library tidyverse, and then library fur, which allows us to run parallel processing. More on that bit, but we'll run each of these. And if you don't have any of them installed, simply what we did earlier, install that packages, baseball R, tidyverse, or fur, or none of them if you already have them installed. So load in all three of those, and then what we're going to do is figure out the minor league timeline. So we'll say MLB League, which gets the API data, and look at it. So we see American League, National League, Cactus League, Grapefruit League, International League. That's where the minor leagues start, and it goes all the way down to Dominican Summer League. So you don't have to worry about the league IDs, but what we do have to worry about is when it started. So we see the preseason start date. So the start date for the minor leagues was April 5th, and then the end date appears to be September 28th. So then we'll create a data frame that allows us to do that. Not only that, but make sure we get our sport ID. So we see 11 all the way down to 16, which indicates those are the minor league sport IDs to be able to get the play-by-play data. But first, let's input the dates. So I'll just call it dates. Create a data frame. Create a column, that's a day, and then we'll rep, which is just replicating a thing, and we'll say sequence as date, start with 2022-04-05, and then comma, as date 2022-09-28, then by dates, because we want to get each one. And then after that, we just want to repeat it once. So times equals 1. So now we have a data frame of all the minor league dates. So now let's get the minor league game PKs for each minor league level. So we'll just call it minor league game PK list. And we'll say 1 nrow dates. And then within tidyverse, there's a per package called map, and we'll use that. We'll say function x, And within that, we'll get the MLB game PKs. So MLB game PKs, then in parentheses, dates, $day, X. And then our level IDs, this is where it gets important too. Level IDs equal combine 11 to 14 and then 16 for the Dominican Summer League. So then we'll run this. It'll take a minute or two. There might be error messages that appear. So like this one, it's not really an error message, I should say, but it's just letting you know that the code is running fine. So run the code, and we'll be able to see shortly when this code stops to be able to get the minor league game PK. So now that we have it wrapped up in a list, let's get it into a data frame. So I will keep it shorter and just say minor ML game PKs, and we'll say minor league game PK list, bind rows, so we'll bind all these rows together, and then we'll say dplyr filter, and then this is where we'll say status. So this is a column in that data frame that we created. Status coded game state equals false, and then put a exclamation point is.na game PK. And what essentially that does is just removing all NA game PKs. Then not only that, add another piping operator. And what we're going to do next is just pull the game PKs, because that's the only thing we're interested in. So I'll run that. We see we have 108, or not 108, 10,825 games. So the reason why I downloaded FUR is because it allows you to run parallel processing. And parallel processing basically allows you to use more cores on your computer. So for you to look up cores, make sure you don't overrun the amount of cores on your computer. Basically what we're doing here is we are running our parallel processing, i.e. basically there's going to be multiple instances of RStudio open in the background that allows you to run the code that you want to run. So within that, I will leave screenshots as I'm saying this, but go on to Task Manager. I'm not exactly sure what it is on Mac, but on Task Manager, you'll go on CPU, and you'll see when you go down there in like the bottom middle area, that it will tell you how many cores you have available, which means how many workers you have available. But I would highly recommend not using all of them. Use maybe close to all of them. So in my case, I have 8. So I will do this. So we'll say plan multi-session, which just basically means we're going to parallel process these cores. And we'll say workers equals 6. Because I have 8, I want to use 6. So we'll run that. And that's just basically pre-processing it. And then we're going to create like a safe PBP function, because who knows if the code might not run for a certain game PK. A game PK might have registered, but there might not be any play-by-play data, but we still want the code to run. So a simple way to do that is just run pers safely package, or pers package, a function called safety that allows you safely, that basically tells you, hey, if there's an error, just skip it, go to the next one. So we'll call that safe PBP. And then we're going to wrap it into a list, but we're all going to do it in one fell swoop, because again, it's going to take so much time. And when I mean so much time, it's going to take so much time. Okay, when I was pulling the 2021 data or on my Twitch stream a couple weeks ago, you saw that it was like 2.5 hours and it wasn't done running. So with that being said, let's go ahead and run it. So we'll just say MLPBP, which is short for minor league PBP. We'll say 1 to n row ML game PKs, right? Piping operator. And this is where we can use the fur package. So fur future map function X, and we'll say safe PBP ML game PKs, or actually it shouldn't be nrow. Excuse me, sorry about that. It shouldn't be nrow, it should be length, because it's not a data frame, it's just a vector of values. So then ML game PKs X. And then what I like about fur is allows you to get progress. So we'll say progress equals true. And then add another piping operator. We'll say in the per package, we'll say map result, because when you run safely, it gives you either an error or result within a list. And we'll say map result bind rows. And that will get us our minor league play-by-play data. So I'm going to run this, and again, it's going to take a long time, but I will more than likely stop it. So I'm going to run it and just show you like what shows up when you're running this code with the fur future map package. So again, I set up to have 6 of the 8 cores running. It gives you a progress bar, excuse me, and it goes from 0 to 100%, not real quick, but as it progresses, the line will get bigger and bigger and closer to 100%. So when this is finished, we'll come back and I will show you how to take that play-by-play data and insert it into your PostgreSQL database. For example's sake, I reduced the data set by a large margin. Instead of me running a large amount of games, I just sampled 20 and pulled the data. That way I can be able to explain it much quicker and be able to pull the data in a quicker way. So now that we have the quote-unquote minor league play-by-play, we can kind of see it here. So it just randomly sampled 20 games, and we can see all the columns. If you watch on Twitch, you should be able to see all the various columns that are in here, and I'm actually curious if they have they have different types of pitch types. Perfect, just perfect to the last minute detail. Anyways, we're gonna write this table now. So we still have our connection loaded up here. So now, as simply put, we can do db write table. And since we're writing it for the first time, we can leave it as is. So what do we want to name it? We'll call it Minor League Play-by-Play 2022. And the value is ML PBP. Now you can change the name of it to whatever you want. And we'll say overwrite equals true for the first one. But let's say you're scraping this by day, right? Once the season starts, you do day by day by day by day. It's best that when you create the table initially, you write overwrite equals true first. Then when you're adding data, say overwrite equals false, then comma, append equals true as such. So append equals true. So that way the data that's already in there stays in there, as well as the data that you get also goes in there. So I'm not going to run this. I'm going to just run overwrite equals true. And we get this error that says it's a baseball ARD data. So simply we'll add another line, MLB or MLPBP as data frame. Now that we have our data set, again, I just did a sample of 20 for the sake of this video, but if you follow along, you'll have full season. But again, it will take a lot of time. Like, go ahead and do something else when you're running this code. So after we get that, let's put it in our database. So we already have our connection set, and so we're going to write a table. And basically, we're going to say our CONNN, which is the connection, is our connection that we created. Whatever you want to name the table. So I'm going to name it Minor League PBP 2022. Our value, which is Minor League PBP, and then this is where it gets important. When you're creating a table, just do override equals true. However, when you're doing like adding new rows, like let's say you're trying to run this after each day when the minor league season starts, you'll say append equals true and then overwrite equals false. But in this case, since we are just creating the table, we will do overwrite equals true and we run it. So now that we have that in there, let's run some basic queries that kind of showcase what data is in there. So we still have our connection and it's not deleted, so we're going to call it, we'll just say test, and we'll run the example dbget query, so assign our connection, and we'll say select star from minor league PBP 2022 limit 100. So we'll run that, and we can see our data is appeared. Look at how beautiful that is. And so we have all the same data, and now we don't have to run all that data we want, but be example with, or be wary of the code. Now there's other ways you can save it if you want to do different ways. So a typical way of saving without making it too large is write RDS. So write RDS, and we'll say ML PBP, and then whatever you want to name it. So we'll say minor league PBP.RDS, and then you can save it as an RDS file, because that way you can add this compression, and you can say GZ, BX, whatever. GZ, I think, no, excuse me, XZ is the one that compresses it the most if you want to save space. But then, now you have the minor league play-by-play data, right? Now let's run a query that might be a little bit more in-depth, but still allows you to get some of the data that you would like. We're going to run a simple query, and it's going to look a little bit different because it's being written in R, and we want to basically escape the quotes, because quotes are important in writing SQL code in terms of referring to columns, maybe filtering down. So I'll give an example here, and what we're going to do is we're going to get the average fastball velocity from the random sample. Again, yours may look different than mine, because again, I only sampled about 20 games. But we'll call this test 2, run our query, same thing, so make sure you have that connection, and then I'm going to put it in single quotes this time for a reason I'll tell you shortly. So we're going to say select average, and then in double quotes is where we'll insert the column. So in this case it's pitch data start speed, and so we're selecting that average, and we'll say as average velo from our database that we created, so minor league PBP 2022, where, and this is where we're going to go, where, again, double quotes, and we'll say details type code equals, and then this is where it will get interesting, because again, you want to escape the characters. So we will run quote, single quote, escape, or actually, excuse me, escape quote FF backslash quote, and then another quote to fill out the rest of the query, but basically what those backslashes do is it escapes the characters to let you know, hey, I'm using single quotes to filter down this data set. So we'll run that and we'll pull it up. So in my data set, the average velocity is 93.6 miles an hour. But before I end this video, I will go over back to PG Admin to show you guys the data in the database. Now that we're back in PG Admin 4 and you can see the database, how you pull up this query tool is you'll just click this button, query tool, and it allows you to go into query. So you can select data. So we'll say select star from, and this is where it's a little bit different because it's technically under the public schema, so you have to refer that. So you'll say public dot minor league PBP 2022, and then I will say limit 100. So then we'll run this, and then it gives you all the data and what data type it is. So if you prefer to write queries in here and pull data, great. Otherwise, you can use it in R. But thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. I'll have a second part to this video to scrape minor league play-by-play data in Python coming up. So thank you so much and have a great day.